Then let's move on to the fourth area of due diligence that we're going to talk about. And this is the one that I wanted to spend most of the time talking about today. And that is all of the documents we need to make sure that we get from the seller or some of the other sources, and that we're actually reviewing these documents. So here's all the documents that we're going to talk about. As you can see here, there's just a lot of documents, and I sort of divided them into these three different areas related to what we're trying to take a look at. Okay, so we're going to take a look at the documents related to how we're checking out the finances behind the property. We're going to take a look at the property related documents, and then documents we need to take a look at to make sure that we're collecting so we have information on who our tenants are and whether they're going to be good tenants. Okay, so let's take a look at what due diligence we need to look at for the documents that are going to tell us about the finances behind the property. So, I wanted to give just a little bit of warning here. Did I skip a slide? No. The couple of slides that I'm going to talk about here in this section, of course, are only going to apply to rental properties that have tenants in place, or I couldn't think of a better term other than conventional sales. In other words, there's somebody there that can hand you the documents. If there aren't any tenants, the property is vacant, you're not going to need to take a look at all of these documents that I'm going to talk about. Or if you buy properties through foreclosures or auctions or somewhere where there's nobody that's going to be able to hand you their documents, then I guess you don't need to pay attention to this whole section. But I think it's a good idea for you to sort of listen anyway, because chances are you could buy a property in the future that has tenants in place. So make sure that you are taking a look at all of these different documents. So what we're going to take a look at first are some of the documents that are going to give you information on the rental property's finances. So we just talked about, hey, is this a good investment or not? Am I going to cash flow on it? Is it going to appreciate? You want to double check all of your numbers that you just crunched. Not only that, you want to take a look at these financial documents because you want to vet what the seller is telling you. Hey, the selling landlord is telling me that I'm going to cash flow $10,000 a year on this property. Is that true? Is he lying? Is she exaggerating? What's going on? So I gotta be able to check out these financial documents to verify what the seller is telling me. And then it's going to help me to, like I said, it's going to help me to figure out, do I want to buy this property? Is it cash flowing? What are the income on this? What are the expenses? And then should I buy it? Is it going to be a good financial investment? And then as I go through the slides too, all of these different documents. This one I actually wanted to mention that I didn't put down what a deal breaker was because I think it might vary amongst individuals. And then so Hadi, I wanted to sort of give you the heads up as we go through each one of these sections. I want you to let everybody know whether it's a deal breaker or not, whether you get some of these financial documents, okay? Because I mentioned where I haven't purchased a rental property with tenants there, and all of my property have been vacant because I need to buy a specific type of property. So, but I know you in Virginia have bought tons of these, so you can let us know whether it's a deal breaker or not if we get these documents, okay? So here's all of the documents you should be getting from the seller when you're doing your due diligence for buying. The first one you want to get is financial statements, some sort of financial statement that gives you a picture of what the rental property is doing. Now, there's no like form or something you have to do, but you can ask the seller to give you a profit and loss statement or what's known as an operating statement. Or maybe this other source that I read said ask them for a balance sheet that lists all of the good equipment or depreciation schedules. And then I don't know how you can help me with this or help us with this is how many years of financial statements do you ask for? Something that I read said you should ask for the past 3 years of financial statements. And then it's always a good idea, or somebody suggested it's a good idea to ask what's called for a pro forma statement. And what it does is it gives you a forecast as to, okay, this is what I expect my rental property to do this year. So Hadi, would you say that this is a deal breaker? If you don't get some type of financial statement from the seller, would you still consider moving forward with the property? And you know what? I'm sorry, let me rephrase that because I know you have different criteria. So let me rephrase that. Do you think your average landlord, your mom and pop landlord like me or a lot of the listeners on the call today, if we don't get a financial statement from the seller, should we still move forward with the purchase or not?
Single family or multi-unit?
Both, I guess.
Single family, we really don't.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, single family is multi-family. Yeah,
Okay.
You inherit all the tenants,
Yep.
and I don't want to say it happens all the time, but is what do you call it? Fraud is as important part of the work.
Mhm. Absolutely.
And um, I manage multi-units for new landlords. And I see what they go through. There's discrepancies on the tenants' rents. Uh, the landlords credit a month before the security deposit to the tenants'
Mm,
rents. So they report on a spreadsheet or on financial statements wrong wrong rent amount. You close and then you realize the rent amount is different. Um,
okay.
If you're not inheriting a tenant and it's a single family home, might be a little bit of overkill. But then on multi-unit, you need to be very careful that you receive accurate information. And your attorney will ask for a stop all, right?
Hold on to that one because I got that one in like I think the next slide or two.
Right, right. So yeah, this is perfect for multi-units, right?
Excellent. That's a really good answer. I hadn't even thought about the difference between the single family homes and the multifamily. So you're saying, yeah, it's probably pretty critical for if you're buying a multifamily to get some sort of accurate picture about what the property is doing financially through a statement. Okay.
What kind of tenant are you inheriting? If
Hmm.
tenant's ledger, you might have a tenant that have not paid their rents in years, and then the landlord says, yes, they're paying.
Exactly. Yep. Okay. So I think this one is critical for everybody to get from the seller to get a good, accurate representation of what's going on with the rental property. And then to make sure, like I said, that the landlord is being truthful and not exaggerating or painting the rental property in a good light. Okay. Okay. Let's move on to the next one. Hadi, I don't know if you would ask for, or have you asked for bank statements? When I was reading up on it, some people were suggesting that you should ask for the seller's bank statements, but I don't know if the sellers are willing to provide that. Some stranger asked me for my bank statements. I don't know if I would provide it. There's a lot of private sensitive information on there. So what do you think about that one?
Well, on a building operating bank account, not on a single family home, but on a multi-units, especially the larger ones, 24, 48 units, yeah, it's required. No buyer is willing to buy solely based on the seller's estimated revenue. They want to see how much deposit the
Interesting.
made, so they know how much rent they're collecting, and they want to know how much it came out, so that more or less is how much expenses he has.
So and I guess the reason why I hesitated on this one, and some people did mention that no, people are not going to provide bank statements, is because there's another way to get that information, and that is through asking for the tax returns. And a lot of people who were writing about this subject said, these tax returns are probably better because it gives you a really good overview of what the actual financials are for the rental properties. Why? Because the landlord is not going to exaggerate, for the IRS. They're not going to claim, oh, I made $100,000 cash flow, because then they got to pay taxes on it. So they're going to, be a little bit more, they're going to be more truthful about it. And then the tax write-offs are also really good because, excuse me, the tax returns are really good because you can actually see, what the write-offs on there. So it gives you a really good overview of what the repairs and improvements are. So for example, if the seller is telling you, oh, I just put a new roof on it last year, well, then that is a big expense. It should be a write-off that was included on the tax returns. If you don't see it on there, then that gives you, pause as to, okay, why is this person claiming that they replaced the roof last year, but then I don't see it on their tax return. So what do you think the difference between the tax returns and the bank statements? Is one better than the other? Do you prefer one or the other, or both?
No, I don't show my tax return to anybody.
Okay.
This is have you have other properties, you have things in it that it's not part of the deal I'm making with the buyer. I'm not gonna show it to anybody. Most real estate investors with multiple assets are that way. Because they have more in it, their LLCs have more in it, they have LLC series in one tax return. And the bank,
Now, when they say tax returns, they're probably not asking, or they probably don't mean like your entire tax return, because I mean, my God, this like yours is probably 1,000 pages long. But what about that schedule? What is it? Schedule E, the schedule that shows the financials for that particular property.
yes, but then show me more, you get stuck with them. Most of the time, as a seller, if I'm selling something and I get involved in stuff like this with a buyer, uh, we tell them, okay, we certify through estoppel, and here's the last bank statement that belongs to this property. Any more than that, I will consider might not deal with that buyer.
Interesting. Okay. Everybody on the call, I would love to hear from you if you have purchased a rental property or, when you sold it. Have you preferred one or the other? Has the buyer asked you, hey, I want to see your tax returns? Or were they okay with, just looking at your bank statements? Or have you yourself asked for one or the other? So this would be a good chance for you to share what, you guys have done. I don't know. I think I would be also happy with the bank statements because those are like the true transactions that are going in and out. And these tax returns can be a little bit difficult to read, to understand. I don't know. Like I said, I haven't done one before, so I guess I would rely on the advice of my attorney or broker to give me a good idea of what's going on. So, but how do you're saying you would prefer the bank accounts, bank statements?
Yeah, and not on a single family home.
Oh yeah, I agree.
One unit, show me all your bank statements and your mother maid's name and line up your children and see what you got. Something, no,
Overkill, huh?
yeah, it's not, there's between the buyer and the seller, there should be a level of trust. And on the latest days, I seen it on larger commercial deals, larger apartment buildings. The lender comes during their final approval process, and they will ask for all sort of documentation about the community.
Ah, I didn't know the lender asked for some of these financials. Good to know.
Yeah, because they want to make sure that the buyer and seller, they didn't massage the numbers so they can,
Hmm.
oh, they come out and they ask for all this documentation. That's a completely different story. But you haven't made a deal with the buyer. We don't know even the buyer is qualified that are asking for all these different things.
Excellent. So this is where, I mean, we're talking about landlord due diligence, but you just mentioned, of course, the lender is going to do their due diligence as well. So they might take a look at some of these financials. So you mentioned though that for single family homes, you probably wouldn't. I don't know about that. And you guys on the call, let me know what you think. But even for a single family home with tenants in there, I would want something. Yeah, a financial statement would be good to take a look at, but I'm not going to necessarily trust what the seller's telling me. I would want to look at something. I would want to double check that either with a bank statement or a tax return. If you guys on the call think something differently for the single family homes, let us know.
Yeah,
But get something, right?
right. For single family homes, they had only five numbers.
Right.
Five,
It'll definitely be easier.
taxes, insurance, management fee,
Mhm.
and mortgage doesn't matter because buyer gotta go get their own mortgage, right?
Yep, yep. Much easier, of course, for the single family homes. All right, let's move on then for another document that you should be getting from the seller if you're thinking about buying the property, and that's something called a rent roll. And what the rent roll is, it's like a summary or gives you a quick snapshot of the tenants and of the financials for the rental property. Now, you don't need to include all of these, or the seller doesn't need to include all of these in the rent roll. But when I was doing my research, these are some of the pieces of information that could be included in a rent roll. So, for example, you want to include the property address, the type, if it's the owner is managing it, or maybe the management a property management company is managing it. Is it occupied or vacant? If it's a multifamily, what are each one of the units comprised of? How many bedrooms and baths? Who the tenants are, when the lease starts, when it ends, the lease term, the security deposit. I don't know. To me, this sounded like a lot of information to have in a rent roll. I don't necessarily at this point care about who the tenants are, etc. What I really want to see in the rent rolls is this: the payment history. you know, what rent amount did they pay over time? Were there any late fees, bound checks, fees, or any type of charges over time the tenants? And then what is their rent? Some people were saying to include what was the original rent amount, any increases or decreases over the years, and what their current rent amount is. This is the most important piece of information you want to see in the rent rolls, because you want to take a look at what these tenants are doing. Are they paying overtime? Are they habitually late? Are they behind? I'm inheriting these tenants, and I'm also inheriting the problems. So if there are any problems with the payments, with the rent payments, I want to know about that. And then it's important, is like Hadi was saying before, with the financial paperwork, is crunch the numbers, do the math. Don't just take it by faith that the landlord who's selling it is telling you, okay, I'm cash flowing $10,000 a year. Okay, great. Take a look at the rent rolls and just say, okay, here they are. Yeah, they look okay. Take each item by item, line by line, crunch the numbers, do the math, make sure that, yeah, what the landlord who's selling, told me is cash flowing is actually, those are the actual numbers that in reality there. So rent rolls are really, really a big part of the due diligence when you're buying the rental properties. And then this is the document that is critical. I mean, there's no if and or when or about this one. You have to get this when you are buying the rental properties, and you've heard Heidi mention it a couple of times. It's called the estoppel certificate, or the estoppel letter. I had no idea what this was. I kind of heard it before, but I wasn't quite sure what it was. But what it is, it's a document that's signed not by the seller, not by the landlord. It's signed by the tenants. And what they're doing is they're confirming the lease terms. Again, these are just suggestions of what you can include in this estoppel certificate or letter, but some of them are, a little bit more important than others. But it's a good idea for the tenant to confirm how much security deposit did they pay. This one is critical. How much rent are they actually paying, and what is their status? Am I current? Do I owe some money? Am I, in eviction as a tenant? This one, I'm not sure at this point whether I care too much. What their name is, their contact information, their lease and start and end dates. This one would be really good. And then is this tenant getting any special lease considerations? Maybe you have a no pet policy, but you made an exception for this tenant, or you made any type of variation or change from the original lease that's different for this tenant. You want them to verify, because you don't want to be any question about it later on. And then I guess the current landlord could include if there's any lease violations. I don't know about you, but I don't know if most landlords would disclose if there's any violations, because they're trying to sell the rental property. They're trying to get rid of it. So they don't want to have, too many bumps in the road there. So I don't know how truthful landlords would be about violations, but this is really, really important for you to get, because what happens if the landlord is making things up, or the information that he or she has is different than, they disagree with the tenant. So this is a good way to get the tenant to sign off on it. And that way you're double checking the information to make sure what the landlord is telling you is actually truthful there. Let me see, got a couple of comments here. Mark is saying that he likes this. Is this common to ask for? Not only is it common, Mark, it is absolutely essential, crucial, a must-have document for everybody to ask for. And then he's saying, has anybody received a pushback asking for the estoppel? Hadi came back at a perfect time. Can you maybe not explain, but give us any information you want about the estoppel certificate, because that is considered like a must-have. You should not overlook this when you're buying a rental property, right? And has anybody ever received any pushback when they asked for this?
Well, if the seller's hands are clean, estoppel is not a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
The ones that they push back,
Let's try that and see.
they have no warranty on it. See, you are testifying that the information that you give to the buyer to make a decision to purchase your
Yep,
is 100% true. If
exactly.
they exaggerate some numbers someplace.
Yep. And of course, I mean, we don't want to say that the landlord has an incentive to, but they want to present the rental property in the most positive light. So they may exaggerate. And unfortunately, some of them will out and out lie. This is an absolute way, to double check everything. to make sure that the landlord is not doing some of these. So maybe I should have changed this here a little bit, but this one to me, deal breaker. Would you say, Hadi, it's a deal breaker if you don't get this estoppel certificate? I don't think an attorney would want you to proceed with it if you don't get this.
It depends on the purchase price.
Uh-huh.
You're buying at the market price and you're paying a full market price for the property. Estoppel is what do you call it? Is necessary. Without it, walk. But then if you're buying a property that's trashed already, you gotta gut the building, get rid of all the tenants, and you're buying it at 40% of the market value, that estoppel doesn't have that much value.
Yep, really, really good point.
Yeah.
Got to go ahead.
We had a landlord in 2020 purchase a property from a very well-known commercial brokerage. He didn't know what to get the estoppel is. They told him it's streamlined, so they provided attorney to closing. He ended up with the estoppel. He ended up selling it with $100,000 loss a year later.
Wow.
And then he had to provide estoppel. And then he had to disclose all this drama that he had through that 1 year with it. So new investors on multi-units, you got to be very careful. Rentals, a single family might not be as important. Okay.
Excellent, excellent. I hadn't thought about that perspective. Very good. And then Mark and Diane both had similar questions there. I'm so glad you guys brought that up because this hadn't even crossed my mind. So Hadi, who creates this estoppel certificate? Does the attorney? Is there like a sort of standard form that everybody uses? Can the buying landlord do it, or the selling landlord do it? Who comes up with these estoppel certificates?
It's a form. Is
Uh-huh.
available online. You don't have to pay for it. It's free, right? So don't go to e-form and just print it. And the tenants they sign, parts of it the landlord they do, and then it's a certificate of accuracy for your rent for the information that you receive.
Is this something that your attorney, like I'm the seller, I know that the buyer is going to ask me for it. I can just get my tenants to sign all of this, beforehand. Is that something that my attorney would be able to give me?
Well, the attorney might give you the paper, but it's a little involved, so you probably got to take care of it yourself.
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry. I meant just like the template for it. The attorney can give you the template for it. And then, of course, you got to fill in all the information.
It's called estoppel, so type estoppel form PDF, probably 50 of them pops up.
And then if I'm the buyer, I can't, of course, approach the tenants and say, hey, guys, sign this. Who's the one that actually does like the transaction or does the, filling out of the information and asking the tenants to sign it?
It's not the buyer that does that. It's the buyer receives it. Tenant estoppel certificate, I found 5 of them. So it's e-forms have it, there's plenty. So the way it basically works is that the buyer received this, and we usually have produced it as a management company on behalf of the seller.
Okay.
But we have had buyers to go and interview each of the tenants individually on the walk.
Really?
Yeah, because it's a multi-unit. You inherit the tenants, right?
Hold on to that thought because I had a question about it later on. So if you don't mind, let me come back to that one because I wasn't sure how that worked either.
Estoppel is a letter, it's a form, it's a 3-page form.
Okay.
Property management or the seller at the sometime during the sale process will have all the tenants complete.
Thank you. Who was it? Mark and Diane for mentioning that. I didn't cross my mind. Otherwise, I would have Googled it for you guys and I would have provided it for you here. But I'm so glad you asked. I'll, look it up and like Hadi was saying, just Google it. It's a 3-page form. It should be available to everybody. So sorry, I didn't think about it to give it to everybody here. But this is why we do these presentations to let you know this is just a really important document for you guys as buyers to take a look at. It's just a check against what the landlord is telling you, the seller. And then a couple more financial documents you might want to take a look at, but these are mostly related to a multifamily there. And these are not as critical, is that you might want to take a look at the utility bills. for the rental property if the landlord is responsible for paying those utilities. And of course, that usually only takes place with the multifamilies. So why do you want to take a look at these utility bills? Because it verifies what what the bills are that you're responsible for. So if the seller's telling you, hey, the landlord, you got to provide the water and the tenants pay for the gas and electricity, but then you acquire the property and you find out, oh, that's not the case. You got to supply the heat. Oh my gosh, now you're going to be in really big financial trouble because now you got to pay all the heating bills over the winter, and that's going to really, really hurt you financially. So one of the reasons why you want to ask for these utility bills, just to make sure that the seller is telling you accurately which bills you're responsible for and which ones the tenants are responsible for. The other reason you want to take a look at these bills is you want to take a look at, again, that the landlord, the seller is being accurate on what these utilities actually cost you. If the seller is telling me, yeah, I pay $500 a year for water, and then you get the property and the actual cost is $5,000 a year, well, that's a tremendous difference. That could make or break you. And it could be not that they were purposely trying to lie, 500, 5,000, maybe they accidentally left off a zero and you just, it was an accident, but that's it. I mean, that's not going to help you now that you bought the property. So it's just a really good way to double check that what the utilities are actually going to cost you. And then another really important one is, hey, is the seller actually current on their utility bills? I mean, sometimes we know that sellers get into financial difficulty and they just want to dump their properties. And one of the first things they start skimping on or skipping are these utility bills. And when you close on the property, I mean, it should be, discovered during the whole closing process, but that's when you're doing your due diligence. I don't want to get stuck with a $5,000 unpaid NICOR bill. So this is why you want to ask for these utility bills. And then I think the last one is you might want to take a look at any contractor agreements or service provider agreements. Again, this is mostly going to be for multifamily, but also some single family home, in that maybe the selling landlord has a snow removal service or landscapers or an HVAC, maintenance company. Are there any service provided agreements in place? Now, these, of course, are not going to continue because, the contract is between the seller and the company, and the seller is no longer owns the property. But hey, you might want to take a look at them because maybe you want to keep these service providers. Some of these contractors or service providers might have been servicing this property for years and years and years. They know the property in and out, how to take care of it, how to remove the snow, how to do the landscaping. So rather than you trying to find a new service provider, you may want to continue with these guys. Or even if you're going to move over to a new company, it's not a bad idea to take a look at what these service provider agreements are, because that way you can see, okay, this is what the current landlord, company is charging them. Now I can go out and do some comparison shopping and see what some of these other service providers can charge me for the same service. And then we just talked about estoppel certificates, the same for the verifying the rental property history. Same thing for these contractor or service provider agreements. If you are going to continue using the same service providers that the previous landlord did, get one of these estoppel certificates from them. That describes, okay, this is the service that you're going to do. This is how much you're going to charge me, and that the landlord who's selling it is current on their payments. You don't, again, want to be hit with a huge multi-$100,000 or $1,000 bills because the selling landlord didn't pay their bills to some of these contractors. So just take a look at that stuff. And then we're not going to spend any time on it because we'll talk about HOAs in the future, but don't forget, if your property is in an HOA, the other due diligence you want to take a look at when you're crunching your numbers for the finances of your rental property is take a look at the HOA budget. You don't want to be surprised that in a year after you bought it, you're going to have a $20,000 special assessment to redo the roof. That is just going to kill your cash flow for the rental property, for the next 5 years. So just take a quick look at the HOA budget. Make sure there's not going to be any hidden surprises in there. Okay, so I think that's it for the financial documents. Oops, what am I doing this for? Sorry. Let me do what am I doing? Let me do a quick, oh no, what did I just do? I just lost my controls. There we go. I hit a key accidentally. Let me do a poll for everybody. And just now that we've gone through all of these different documents you should be asking for when you're buying your rental properties, let's see how many of you guys actually have. So how many of you guys have actually taken a look at some of these financial statements or tax returns or rent rolls or all of these documents that we were talking about? Have any of you guys taken a look at these? And then how do you just maybe, if you want to summarize or give any information about these, which one of these do you think are the most important you really take a look at, and which ones do you really not consider to be so critical?
No, estoppel is very important, rent rollers.
I agree. Mhm.
Yeah, those two. The rest of them, you need to evaluate that the seller smell goods or not.
And then you said you prefer taking a look at the bank statements. You get the rent rolls and you get the estoppel, but then you want to do a check on it to make sure that the seller is actually, telling the truth and everything smells good, like to use your phrase there. You like taking a look at the bank statements or what else?
Large multi-units. So large multi-units for each account, for each building, they have one operating account. That is a perfect indication of what the true expenses and income of that property is. If they deposit everything, and even if they receive cash, they deposit it, and they don't pay any of their subs outside. So seller got a smell good, okay?
Excellent. I like the way you phrase that. The smeller's got to sell good. All right. So let's see what everybody's taking a look or has collected. Excellent. Everybody is familiar with these, or for those of you guys who have done it, it looks like you have taken a look at or collected most of the all of the information that I mentioned here today. So good for you guys. You've taken a look at the financial statements, tax returns, bank statements. Okay. So see how do a couple people have gotten the tax returns from some of the sellers. So that's good to know. Interesting, the estoppel certificate, which I think most people would consider the most critical piece of information. Only one of you guys have asked for it in the past. So now that everybody's educated about that one, that's like your guarantee that, hey, this is, what the landlord is telling me is actually true. Hopefully you'll ask for it from here on out. And utility bills and service provider agreements. Excellent. So everybody has done a really good job of being familiar with some of these financial documents and asking for them.